Hello and welcome. You are listening to The Day My Brain Broke, presented by me, Lucy Reddin, in partnership with the Encephalitis Society. We shall be sharing with you the lives and experiences of those affected by encephalitis, a type of brain inflammation. Hello there. So today, on the Day My Brain Broke podcast, we are speaking with John Gearty, who is one of our wonderful volunteers based in Ireland. He actually runs one of our support groups with the lovely Hannah. And today I'll be speaking with him about his experiences. So without further ado, hi there, John. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Hi, Lucy. How are you? Thank you for. It's great to see you again.
Yes, it's good to see you.
Looking forward to our little informal chat.
Most definitely, most definitely. Just to let the audience be aware that I think the last time we spoke or met up in person, I think was back in October 2021 at the My Brain, My Story event in
Birmingham. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So it was a really good event, and I'm really happy and pleased that I can speak with you today. So without further ado, John, can you tell me about yourself before encephalitis? How old you were before you were diagnosed? What was a typical day? What was a typical week in your life?
Okay. Well, it was 2016. I'm 59 now, so that was 5-6 years ago. So I was 53, 54, and I was principal in a wonderful school, a special school for children with mainly mild or moderate learning disabilities. We had two autistic classes for children with autism, for severe and profound. It was a very big school, wonderful staff, wonderful, just a lovely environment. And I hadn't been there that long. I had been principal in a smaller school prior to that, and before that I was in mainstream education for a long time. So I was very much involved with education, and particularly in latter years in special education and in music education. And I was involved in teacher training in two of the training colleges in both music and special education. And I was on lots of committees, both sort of local and national committees. So I was busy from a work point of view, busy in a very happy, content way. I recently become a granddad, and we had our little Tig, our wonderful grandson, was living with us.
Wonderful.
So that added a whole new dimension to life, and was always a reason to come home as fast as I could in the evening.
Yeah.
He was 2 or 3. I have photographs of him coming into the hospital of me on my phone, so in to see me, and I don't actually remember it, but I have photographs that remind me of the size he was, and that was only, there was Valentine's weekend 2016. So it's coming up. The anniversary is coming up.
Yeah.
Soon enough. So yeah, I was busy, and I had. I was lucky. I had lots of friends, and I enjoyed a night out as much as anyone else. And I suppose I was a bit of a prankster. I'd be the one sort of playing a joke on someone and up for a bit of devilment. But I was just lucky in so many ways. I did two grown-up children of my own, all well. And just really myself and Fiona, and then we had little Tig living with us, and my daughter.
Yeah.
So everything was wonderful and manically busy at the same time. But yeah.
So then I think most of us we discovered there was kind of like quite often there's been a run up to leading to us eventually being hospitalized. So are you able to just talk through kind of like the days or the weeks leading up to the event, so to speak?
Yes, yeah. Looking back on it now, and I had kept a diary that my consultant told me to try to keep and write things down, but I hadn't kept a diary of this part of it, but I remember it, that prior to getting sick, a very dear friend of ours died after a prolonged illness over a couple of years, and he eventually died. And I remember playing at the funeral. Music is a passion of mine, and I remember playing at the funeral, and going back to work, going back to school, maybe the day after, and feeling just really miserable, and putting it down to the fact that, you know, it was just, we were all so emotionally drained.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this, they said in school, go home and, you know, take a day or two. And I just remember feeling really, really miserable, and then like developing a very bad flu. And I recall being in bed and just not wanting to move. I don't know whether I could. I'm sure I could have, but just didn't want to. And I was obviously sick because I wasn't eating things, which isn't be like, you know,
No.
I am a kind of a eat food kind of a man. So there was obviously something wrong. And you know, I think I have a memory of Fiona trying to feed me soup or something with a spoon in the bed, or yogurt or something. So yeah, I think we just thought it was a really bad flu, and then I was getting confused, and I was seeing things, imagining things, and I had a tremor in my right hand, you know, when I go to send a text message and that. So, and we wouldn't be
seen any medical professionals at this point?
No, we wouldn't generally be ones to race to the doctor unless there was, you know, a knife sticking out of your head, or you were in severe pain or something like that.
Yeah.
So I did then go down to our GP, and I think initially she thought again I was just, you know, between losing our good friend and the flu, that, you know, I needed a week off. And then she saw that when I stood up, apparently, and I went to walk out, I was wobbly and I couldn't keep my balance, and I had this tremor in my hand.
Right.
And whoever was with me, I think it was my daughter, Alva, and told her to bring me straight to the casualty in the hospital. So off we trotted, and they did a couple of blood tests and a scan. They more or less told me that, look, you know, you've had a tough week or two, and you've got a bad dose, and there's, you know, take a few of those tablets there, and you'll be fine, and take a week off school. And I was just lucky that the following morning, I think my GP rang Fiona to see how I was and how I got on, and she seemed very surprised that I was back in my own bed.
Right.
So she told Fiona to bring me back. So very, very wise and very knowledgeable GP. So I was very lucky from that point of view, because I think we all know the earlier you get a diagnosis, and the earlier they get the right treatment into you, the better chances we have of sort of coming back to normality, if there's such a thing, Lucy, as normality. But
whatever
for anybody, yeah,
exactly.
So I went back the following morning, and they said, I think just to keep everybody happy, they said, look, they'll wheel me into the main hospital. And I was just so lucky that my consultant, Dr. Rizwan, wonderful man, and I still see him every couple of months. We just touch base, and Dr. Rizwan was there, and he did an MRI and a lumbar puncture.
Right.
And then immediately they could see that there was something happening, that it wasn't just the flu.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so I remember the pain in the back of the lumbar puncture. I remember that. I have some memory of that.
Yeah.
But I don't remember the ward or the room I was in. I can't remember that. I have sort of vague memories, but yeah, and so then I think they treated me then they didn't know whether it was viral or bacterial. So I think they started hitting me with both the viral and the antibiotics initially for a few days until results started coming back. And then I think when quite quickly, I don't know how many days, but quite quickly, I think they came in and told Fiona that it was encephalitis. So I think initially nobody knew what that was, and they were just delighted at least they know what it is, and that's, you know, get the right ointment for him and rub it on his head or whatever, and he'll be grand. But I think then they went home, and my children, and I suppose Fiona too, started Googling it, and the dreaded Google that you
never do that, John.
Never do that. Yeah.
And never Google it.
Yeah, and you see all these, obviously the different types of encephalitis and the mortality rate or possible probability, depending on what type you have and how quickly it's diagnosed and all that. So I think they were more concerned then after that. But I don't recall being concerned one way or the other. I was, Do
you remember from like how long a time frame this all took, like from the stage from when you first started feeling a bit fluey, you were at home toing and froing with the GP, to then going into hospital, to then being diagnosed, after the lumbar puncture, the results coming back? Do you remember roughly how long that time frame was?
I'd say I probably was miserable at home for a day or two. And I think quite quickly I started just not being myself and getting lost. I remember being out in the car, and just a friend of mine who lived next door to where I was. And she told me that I said to her, I have no idea how to get home.
Right.
And that was, and I don't know how I got home, but I did get home.
Yeah.
So I would say, Lucy, between that time and going to the doctor and getting into the hospital and getting the results back must have been the guts of a week.
Yeah. So it's a relatively short space of time, a heck of a lot was going on, really.
Yeah.
And so then what type of encephalitis were you diagnosed with, kind of like the day your brain broke, as it were?
Yeah. I was told it was viral. They weren't able to identify the actual virus.
Right.
So he said it's in some test tube somewhere, and they might discover it in a couple of years' time. I might be famous. And and it was in the meninges as well, so it was meningoencephalitis.
Right.
So I just always think, look, I'm one of the very lucky ones that we're both able to sit here and talk, and if you like, have a bit of a laugh about it. Not necessarily a laugh about it, but we can look back and appreciate how lucky we are that we're here, whereas not everybody can do that. So I'm always aware of that. I can't remember, what was the question, Lucy? I'm gone off.
No, you've answered it. It was just literally the type of encephalitis that you were then diagnosed with.
Yeah,
I think that's what I wanted to kind of like convey to our audience.
Yeah, and I remember having a really bad headache and lights. The usual symptoms, I suppose, of typical symptoms of, I think, of meningitis as well. That aversion to bright lights, and I suppose any kind of a bad headache, you're not going to be able to tolerate lights, I think. But I don't remember ever having that type of prolonged headache. So there was obviously something going on, but I don't remember really being worried myself. When I look back.
Yeah, that's funny you say that.
I always felt I was in good hands, and that everything was going to be okay,
And that was even after the diagnosis and realizing what encephalitis was, you kind of still felt.
I didn't feel any different, because I wasn't in a position to sort of Google it, and so I didn't know. I just thought, grand,
Yeah.
As I said, keep giving me I think the antivirals had to be intravenous for, I think, the guts of 3 weeks.
That's right. Yeah.
So and then I was released and everybody, including myself, was just delighted to be out, and that a line could soon be drawn under this, and I'd be back to normal after a couple of weeks. And so I was so ecstatic, I suppose, in getting out. I mean, you wanted to do all the things that I wanted to go back to work, and I wanted to go back to, going out with my friends, and celebrating with Fiona and everybody. It wasn't like that, everything slowly or quickly, I can't remember how long it took to, I think quite quickly, to realize myself that I wasn't operating at the same level that, there was short-term memory, there was certainly sensory stuff. I couldn't deal with noise and going into a crowded place and people talking at the same time, and I was missing and misinterpreting everything, both written and spoken. You'd pick up a newspaper, somebody would say something to you, and you take a totally different interpretation of the words, which in my mind at the time, and you'd be trying to just justify it and explain that, that this is what it means. Whereas, and that was everything from signposts, where it would say, in a car park and going out, it would say no entry.
Yeah.
No entry, and I'd say, well, I'm not entering, I'm exiting, so that's fine. So, so I would, or there was one case where I was visiting someone in hospital. I think it was Fiona's mom or dad, and we were going up we were going up a lift in the hospital, and there was a big sign in the inside of the lift, and it said exit on level 2, which meant, the exit to the hospital, the main exit to the hospital is on level 2.
Yeah.
And there was a lady in the lift had gone into the lift with us, and she went to get out on level 1. And I said, no, excuse me. I said, it's level 2 that you get out. Because the sign said exit on level 2. So in my head, you don't exit on level 1 or level 3 or level 4, even if you want to go to the 4th. You get out on, that's just one thing you can look back and you can sort of smile about it now, but everything was taken very, very literally.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, actually, because I think every now and again, my brain still maybe reverts to that literal sense, rather than you take it almost as it's an action you must do. You must exit on the 2nd floor, rather than,
Yeah.
It's just an information. It's just being informative. It's just letting you know where the exit is. No, this is what we must do. It's telling me to exit on
or do not enter. Well, that's fine. I'm not entering. I'm exiting.
I'm leaving. It's all good. Yeah.
And go ahead. Yeah. So that took a while to sort of retrain. Now I find I think, and I analyze something, I say, exactly what does that mean? Less and less as the months and years go by, thank God.
Yeah.
I think it's like, just redeveloping those neural paths or whatever they call them, and then establishing some sort of confidence in yourself that, I'm not going to screw up here. I'm okay,
Yeah.
Whereas for a long time there was that apprehension and that thinking, I am going to mess up here.
Yeah.
And your confidence, so as well as processing speed and memory, the confidence thing was a big thing,
Yeah.
Sorry, Lucy.
No, I was just going to ask if you could just go into that a little bit more, because I think that's something that maybe not everybody understands or recognizes, just how deep it affects our self-confidence. Because I also, myself and many people I've spoken to with encephalitis, that is one of the things, it completely changes and you do completely lose your self-confidence. So can you just explain a little bit for the audience, just, how that's kind of like on a day-to-day basis, how your confidence kind of like went down and how you were able to then bring that back, if you ever were?
Yeah, I'll try. Well, I suppose as a teacher, I would have been always very tuned into children's belief in themselves, and some sort of sense of self-worth. And if your baseline with a child and the child had no belief in their ability to do something, and whether that was their ability to socialize or their ability to find the square root of 765, you worked on you found a scaffold that was close to the level that they were on, and you gave them confidence and you gave them loads of praise and things. So I suppose as a teacher, I'd have been tuned in a lot, of being aware of people's self-esteem and the importance of it, because it's huge for everybody. and also memory. Like I was fascinated with how children memorize, or I used to love going into a new class and 30, 34, 35 children, and I could memorize everybody's name in a short spell of time, and then I'd leave the room and I'd tell them, mix yourselves around, lads. So I'd have to remember faces and names, and I'd go in and and they'd be thinking, oh, Mr. Memory Man, and all of a sudden, Mr. Memory Man wasn't remembering things. And I could remember things, and I could remember. Well, if Fiona would dispute this, that I didn't remember everything, like the things we did and places we went, which I would go, but I couldn't remember, and I still can't recall. Like I hear a melody, and it could be a beautiful melody, and before in Encephalitis, I'd go into piano, and I'd be able to rattle it off, maybe not the same way that Franz Liszt or somebody would have rattled it off, but I'd have my own. I'd have my own John version on it, and that's I can't do that anymore. I just can't hold it, but I know that I heard something beautiful. And I'll write it down as fast as I can, and I'll Google it, and it's fine. I can write it out and I can improvise on it, but the actual backbone of the piece of music would have been in the head somewhere. It's no longer in the head. I need that. I need to write that down, some sort of a notation to give me the structure. I'm gone off on a tangent here, Lucy. We were talking about self-esteem. Yeah, self-esteem. And that went very quickly. And the more you failed in something, the more you messed up on a simple errand, like going to the shop. And I was really insisting that I wanted to do things on my own and get my independence back, so I could go back to school and I could do things. So I was pushing the boat out a little bit further than I should have. And I think, my doctors were saying, listen, slow down and don't be beating yourself up. And even decoding new pieces of music, I could read music quite well before the encephalitis, and something I hadn't seen before. And I just automatically, because I'd been doing it from the time it was, not because I'm particularly gifted but because that was my thing. So as a child, I wasn't playing football, I was playing music. So therefore I could read it, and all of a sudden, something that I'd never heard before. So I didn't have the melody in my head, that kind of some sort of a form in my mind, in my ear to hang the music on. I was looking at notation, and I was seeing, key signatures and time signatures and chords and structures, and it all of a sudden I couldn't make sense of it. It was all too much information at the same time.
Right.
And that bugged me. And people were saying, go back and simplify it a bit. And I wasn't really into simplifying things. I just was so the more I tried with that, the more I could see that I wasn't able to do it, and I wasn't retaining things I couldn't make sense of. Follow. I'd love watching golf and things on the telly, and I could see straight away who was at 26 under, but 2 minutes later I'd say, no, was it player A or was it player B? So I'd have everything be written down, and and then you'd analyze that when everybody be gone to bed, and you'd be sitting there listening to a piece of music, and that's when you might think about it, and you'd say, like, am I getting any better? Am I going to get any better? Or is this the way it is? And at the same time, telling yourself, look, I'm able to walk around, I'm able to continue life. I'm able to feed myself, I'm able to talk, I'm able to think reasonably, logically, although that could be disputed. So, you were conscious that you didn't want to be seen to be moaning, and people close to me would say, well, we didn't know that, John, you were seen to be moaning all the time. And that's, I can understand if that's what they say. Because, there were a lot of things that did sort of whack the confidence. And then and then that affected everything from and I was so lucky that I had, we had little Tiggy here and our little dog, Winnie. And I had my world of music, so I didn't really have to. I'd be quite happy, playing the piano for a few hours every day. And as much as I was a social, or still am, very social person. I didn't. So I found and as well as the fact you didn't want all this, you were aware of the sensory stuff. If you went out with 2 or 3 friends, even for a coffee, and they were talking, they were telling jokes and things that you weren't getting, and you were trying to pretend that you got them because you didn't want to.
Yeah.
You didn't want people to think that John is, he's now in Gagaland and that's where he's going to stay.
You almost kind of mask whatever it
You
is.
try to, exactly, because you didn't want people to, I don't know, and then you felt that people were treating you different.
Yeah.
Although they were, trying to treat you the same, but and you felt conscious of asking people to repeat themselves and say things a little bit slower. I was very, that was, and I think I'd close my eyes a lot when I'd listen to somebody because I wasn't being distracted by something else. I could really try to focus on what they were saying. And that was all part of the recovery, I suppose. But it wasn't anything.
You say there, John, because it makes me realize that when people talk about when you have a brain injury and you have kind of like short-term memory loss, it's in ways like that. It's just come to me. Maybe it's ways like that. It's not just the fact that, if you say A, B, C, D, E, and then you come back in 5 minutes, you can't say A, B, C, D, E. It's not as simple as that. It's things such as where you used to be able to see something and also hear something and retain both bits of information. It is exactly like you say. Now I have to close my eyes because if I get distracted by seeing something while trying to hear something, it's gone. I'm not going to be, I won't retain that information that I'm hearing. So I remember at one point I had troubles with my ears after encephalitis, and I was told it was the ENT, ear, nose and throat department that were telling me I had to retrain myself by having one headphone listening to music and another headphone would have like an audio book, and they were trying to retrain my brain to listen to the 2 different things going on. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't do it for very long because I found it so difficult, and it just upset me just how I was unable to do it, and I was still experiencing these problems. So I completely identify with what you're saying there. And it's
that reminds me there, Lucy, when you're talking about that, little things like I used to love learning magic tricks. Just part of the trade I was in. That you had to keep the children entertained. You had to be a teacher, a social worker, a nurse, a psychiatrist, a magician, all sorts of things. And I used to love got a kick out of learning. I always did, like as a child, I loved magic.
Brilliant.
And I used to learn these little tricks, and I learned them on a couple of websites. And as I was getting better, and I was on my own at home quite a bit, and I said, I learned a few tricks, and there was no way I could remember the order of things, but I couldn't visualize things. I'd have to feel that I had to go around to the back of the screen to see what was happening, whereas before, or a chessboard, and I'm not a grandmaster, far from it, but I enjoyed the game. But there was no way that I could see a chessboard and say, well, okay, if I move here and he or she moves here, and then it's gone. And so, normally you'd have to try to think, well, what will the board look like in 2 or 3 moves? And if I, in my head, say, okay, I'm going to move a certain piece here, that wasn't, and then I'd have to walk around to the other side of the board. So I stopped. But in the last year or 2, I've started playing, and I'm playing it against the computer, and I just use it as a kind of a part of my cognitive gym, if you like, as well as the fact that I enjoy playing it as an app on the thing, and I can be listening to music, and I can be playing a game of chess, at sort of level, bad, brutal chess player level, whatever, but I still enjoy it, and I'm playing against the computer, which is pitched equally at a kind of a brutal level. So it gives me, certain sense of.
Though? Are you winning any of the games you play?
I'm winning most of them. That's why I have it set really low.
That's fine. You always leave.
But I'm aware as soon as
I did that, I'm so good.
As soon as I turn it up a bit and sort of raise the bar, well then, but that's fine. I mean, but I right here next to me, I have the Chess Player's Bible just arrived in the post today.
Amazing.
So,
amazing.
Again, I will thoroughly enjoy that. I'll get, a month or two out of that. And I know it'll raise my game a little bit. And, but that's nothing really to do with confidence. I know I'm never going to be a brilliant chess player, but it's something that I'd enjoy doing.
Sure. But then I think it's all linked, because it leads me nicely.
Sorry, Lucy. The point I think I was trying to make was there was no way, like 2 years ago, 4 years ago, that something that has a lot of visual stuff in it, and even trying to remember something. And I can't. There's a list, and a lot of people remember the certain moves to opening moves and beginning, middle games, and that.
Yeah,
I'd be wasting my time trying to remember the structures and the names of all the moves. I don't.
Yeah.
So I would just do it analytically. I'd look at the board and try to work it out myself. So that's what I'm at.
No,
so I don't think you won't be reading about me in any chess competitions.
Oh no. You never know, though. You never know. I'll keep it open just in case.
Yeah.
I'll keep an eye out, having a look. So I guess that kind of leads in nicely to what I was saying, the challenges that you now face, kind of like how are you trying to, not even just your family as well. I mean, you mentioned there, Fiona, your wife, how has she managed with you changing? How have you managed with you changing, the new you, as whether, we want to call it that or whatever, adjustment. How have you both coped, and everybody, school, all of that type of thing?
Well, I think essentially I'm still the same person, and I don't think my personality hasn't changed that much. As a consequence of the encephalitis, there's independent medical assessors, and we had to go to get back to work, and they kept saying, "Oh, come back, John, in 6 months, and come back in 3 months," and eventually they told me that I wouldn't be going back to work, and I had to retire. So I was 54 or something. Mm-hmm. I suppose in my head I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
So and because I actually did really enjoy what I was doing, that took a while to get my head around. But at the same time, I was very conscious that if I was there, I'd be messing up, and I knew at that stage that I was aware of things that I was trying to cover up, and that so from that sense, I was relieved that the pressure wouldn't be on me, I suppose. But at the same time, it took a while to get your head around the fact that, you're not doing what you really want to do. But, and then as time goes on, and this COVID pandemic hits us, and that, and I kind of say, in many ways, there are positives in these things. And I suppose the fact that the encephalitis sort of came at the same time as the retirement arrived, the fact that life has slowed down, and the pace is slower, that I have more time. I don't think people see me as a totally different person. I know I'm probably a bit more quirky, Fiona tells me here. I'd be more of a nerd. And I suppose if you listen to me talking about the music and the chess, and you're probably saying, "Hey, John is a nerd," but if I am, so be it. I'm quite happy. But I'm more black and white.
Yeah.
I would be. Yeah, everything is a bit black and white, and I think if I feel strongly enough about it, I will. I'll try to tell the world about it. Rather than keep it to myself.
I love that. Yeah.
And sometimes
it comes from a place of where you suddenly realize I can do this, or I can't do this any longer. That almost kind of like makes you a bit more streamlined and a bit more black and white in approach, isn't it? Because there's no more nuances, there's no more gray areas now. It's just.
Yeah. And then the irony that I have more time, and I have a kind of a naturally curious mind, to learn new things. Yeah. And, and just before the pandemic, I signed up to do the history of Russia from prior to the revolution. And myself and a friend of mine who also had encephalitis. And we did this as a kind of part of the mental gym. We said we do this, and fascinating. And I could follow it, and then you'd research a bit during the week, and you go back the following week, feeling quite close to the to Rasputin and the rest of the blackguards that were around at the time.
Wow.
But and then you would know a week later, it's only all the flesh has gone off the bones of what you had in your head. You know that you were there at the lecture last week, and you can remember one or two things, but not what I would have remembered, 2 or 3 years before. And then you kind of try to marry that with, well, are you getting old? Is that it? But then I'm saying I'm still in my 50s, so I shouldn't be that daft. So, and you accept that. And I have accepted that. And the biggest thing, I suppose, because music was such a passion for me, that it hasn't put me off still trying to memorize, a 3-bar piece of music.
Good.
I'll still do it every now and then, and something that I should be able to just retain it. Every now and then I'll throw it up on the piano and I'll play it 20 times. And I won't get upset if it's not, I just say, look, I can talk, I can walk, I can enjoy life, I can play chess really badly, I can play golf even worse, but I can laugh and I can enjoy it with my friends and family. And
I love your way of approaching it and just still wanting to go out there and try new things, because I think and to me, that actually does tell me or talk to me with confidence. That's a way of confidence or self-confidence that maybe you might not see or maybe not appreciate. Because for me, I remember so with you about music, I'm equally as passionate about music, not to the point where I was teaching it, but just it's something, that is I feel it's just part of my DNA. But I also equally felt the same about books and reading. And I actually couldn't read books for about 8 to 10 years post encephalitis, because I just could not retain the information. And I found that really upsetting for me. Yeah. So I kind of almost did the opposite to you. Rather than going out there and just saying, no, I love reading, I'm still going to approach it, even if I only do like 1 chapter, I actually did the opposite. I just stopped reading. And it's only recently that I've started again, like in the past, let's say 4 years or so. And now I'm literally like just last weekend, I read 1 book over the course of a weekend, and I was just like, yes, this is the best yet, because I was that engrossed. So I just have to find, one, the content has to be amazing, but also, like you say, back in the days, it was a case of, I could come back and revisit this book a week later, 2 weeks later. If I'm not doing it every single day, I've got no chance.
I was the same with books and television films. And
films, ridiculous.
Especially, these weekly series, good luck. But books, I remember that, like rereading something that I really wanted to read. And I'd reread a chapter that I read the previous week. And it would only be when I get to the end of the chapter, I'd say, oh yeah, I read that before.
Exactly.
So you get great value out of the €5 you paid on the books.
I was like that with films. It literally gets to like the final closing scene, and I'll be like, oh, remember what happens now. And it's kind of like, but it's taken me a whole hour and a half that I haven't remembered any of the film leading up to it. So great value if you've not seen it before, or you've bought the DVD. You don't need to worry about any spoilers from me.
But I remember looking back on it now to Lucy, and I don't know, did you find the same? That there was a period of time where you felt it was like the elephant in the room. I didn't necessarily want to talk about it, because at the time I just got him. Every time I talk about it, I get a bit upset. And I felt other people, we all just wanted the whole thing to, come to an end eventually and get on. And I'm not sure how long that went on for, but I do feel, even with friends and that there was, John, you're looking great. And you look, life is good, and boom, boom, boom. Whereas there was nobody really, until I met somebody else over in the National Rehabilitation Hospital, and we've since become good buddies, that I could really talk to and say, there's been such a clean out in there and a change of, some of the wires have been taken out and moved around, and some probably for the better. And the other ones, say to be, baby, you just get on with it.
That's it. I completely identify, because for me, I had encephalitis in 2006, and it wasn't until 2014 that I actually met somebody else who had encephalitis, and that was actually by me going to the Encephalitis Society and wanting to train as a volunteer. So it was my first volunteering, training that I met other people. And it was beautiful. It really was. I've never had such an amazing kind of like weekend with people that, just instant family, just suddenly, people understand, they get it. And I just felt I could speak freely about all of these insecurities that I had and all of these things that I'd hidden to myself, because you're right, it's all about this masking. And I tried to maintain my job. I was lucky enough to go back to work about 3 months after, but which I shouldn't have done, and that's something that other people should well be aware of. Take as much time as you need to rehabilitate before you're even thinking about going back to work. But that was our naivety at the time. I didn't realize I could have taken extra time off. I didn't even realize I needed it at the time. It was only afterwards that mine was a bit more insidious. It was just kind of like I was very much appearing as normal. And I was very good at hiding it from myself, let alone my work colleagues or my friends and family, because it was too scary to deal with. I couldn't understand what was going on. So I just didn't tell anybody, what was going on in here.
But I think, as you said, you appeared as normal. I think I appeared as normal. Like I wasn't getting mental blanks I'm getting now. No, I wasn't drooling or dribbling or struggling, obvious struggles with things.
Yeah.
It was a lot of subtle things, so there was no one big thing that, as I said before, I think it was like a patchwork quilt of a lot of things that just blended together to make a...
Well, for example, with my hearing, I didn't tell anybody about that for years. So I actually started lip reading, and it's only actually funny enough since COVID and the pandemic and obviously having to wear masks, I've just realized just how much I rely on it. And it's actually a bigger problem than I ever actually realized. So that's something that's also been investigated. But it's all little nuances, that you kind of like, I didn't realize that was a problem until, it was highlighted or exaggerated in a certain situation. So, when you talk about when you go and meet your friends for a coffee and then you suddenly realize actually all of this just background noise is now just too much to deal with, where most people wouldn't, give it a thought as to, what are the acoustics going to be? I think about what the acoustics are going to be like when I go and meet up with friends, but I've never told them this, or I may rarely tell them. The only time I might say something is if I choose to go somewhere and I can't deal with it. So it will either be like, I have to leave now, or we're just not doing that place again. But I don't deliberately, tell people, I'm not going to meet, I want to meet here because, it's really good for me to hear sound and all that type of, because you don't want to bring attention to, you're kind of like you're failing almost.
Absolutely. Yeah.
However, the problem with that being, because it's not obvious, it's then something that is quite easy to, you could then internalize it and not actually express to people. So therefore, those closest to you may not even understand just how badly affected, you are post-encephalitis. So I suppose the learning from this for me definitely is to keep reminding friends, keep reminding family, this is an ongoing thing. We have now suffered a traumatic brain injury. There are certain things, like you say, the pathways have just either changed or no longer going in the same direction. And that has to be acknowledged. And we have to remind others, because it's quite easy for others, I think, possibly to not to forget, but, it's just easily I want to say forgotten, but it's not forgotten in the sense of they don't care, forget. It's just life, everyone, we all have life, don't we? And it's just, we just do our day-to-day activities. And, because it's not like, oh, you know, John has difficulties with your speech, so therefore I know that I must speak slowly and clearly. It's not that type of thing, so it's not like we have a continuous.
And that used to drive me mad when I could see somebody, trying to be nice to me and to speak a bit slowly. Then that used to drive me crazy. But at the same time, that did help. But the fact that I needed people to turn things down a bit and slow things down a bit, and I remember my Dr. Rizwan telling me, you won't know yourself. I think he said in 4 years' time. And I was thinking 4 years' time.
Wow.
And every time I went to him, he said, every 6 months after a while, and he'd say, like, the difference I can see in 6 months, whereas I wouldn't see it, or maybe Fiona and the rest of them around here might notice it because it's such a gradual thing. It's only when you look back and you think, or I can see what I'd written down, and you say, wow, I wouldn't have done that last year, or there's no way I'd be ordering a book about chess to come online.
So that's another important point. It is about, I suppose, we have to remind ourselves to look back and look how far we've come, even though it doesn't feel like we may have done, ourselves. That's a really good point. Yeah, because you're right. 6-month markers are probably a good way of assessing how far, we've come when it doesn't feel like it, because it's a relatively short amount of time. But as we know, the brain is a magnificent thing. It can reheal itself, it can refire and, do things in a different way. And 6 months for the brain is a relatively long time, even just to learn how to walk, how to speak again. There's many people who have had encephalitis that have had to retrain their brain literally to walk, talk, to eat. But you hear so many times of people, 6 months later, they're taking steps, they're walking, they're talking. So it's so encouraging. But, it would be as equally difficult for them to think within 6 months how far they've come or how far not, they think they haven't come.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a good reminder to kind of like say, just take stock every now and then and just remind ourselves, how far we have come.
But make sure when you're taking stock that you take stock on a good day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Do that's very good because on the bad days, that is when you could start thinking boo-hoo all of the bad things.
Yeah. And you see, like, everybody has bad days, whether you had encephalitis or you had a brain tumor or cancer, but everybody's going to have good and bad days. So if you are going to analyze things and see how you're doing, don't pick one of those days, pick a normal enough day. There's such a thing.
Very good. Yes, it's so true. But easy. Good point. I'm just thinking, we spoke about earlier just about, using humor and trying to laugh off certain things, or maybe not laugh it off, but, I suppose what I'm trying to ask is, how have you used humor, or have you used humor in ways to kind of like help yourself through your, your rehabilitation? Or is there any funny stories that you could think of in particular?
I don't remember laughing a lot, Lucy. I don't remember in fact, I remember not having any real reason to laugh. And I don't remember seeing the humor in things and getting jokes and things that I used to always be, I wouldn't think twice, as I said, about setting somebody up for a prank or telling jokes. And that stopped. And I know people close to me said, you've got quite serious. And I suppose I did so. But I suppose you look back on things that you did that weren't necessarily funny at the time, but you could see how other people might think they were a bit strange, kind of funny, not in a funny ha-ha kind of a way. Right. But and I'd look back now and I might give a bit of a giggle to myself and say, yeah, wow, I did that. I must have provided a bit of entertainment for the gathering on that particular occasion. I could see this funny side in it in a certain way, but wouldn't have been funny at the time, that you kind of felt you made a fool of yourself for. But that's part of it, and everybody makes a food of themselves, whether you have encephalitis or not, every now and then, So
Very true. That's very
yeah, I don't remember, Lucy, any really. I don't associate funny times with it.
Yeah.
But you do try to, if you can. I'd say I'd be a fairly positive type of person. And looking back now, some of the things I did and some of the things would have more of maybe a cringe factor from a, that you think, Jesus, did I really say that, or did I do that, or was I like that? And it's just so lovely to say, yeah, that's in the past now, and
yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you, John. So if anybody out there listening, were told that somebody that they knew had just been diagnosed with encephalitis, is there any kind of like words of encouragement that you could give to them or to the person who has been diagnosed?
The first thing that comes to my head is the Encephalitis Society, and I don't think, I don't remember how long it took after coming out before I discovered that there was a society out there, and I suppose my own initial thirst for, let's find out about this, and and I know for a long time, even up to now, I'm fascinated with how the brain works, and I suppose I was always, as a teacher, and particularly how intelligence and how we perceive people to be intelligent, which isn't always accurate, but and how the brain works. I'm going off your question, which was
just about how to encourage what.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say, no matter how bad you are, from my own experience of meeting people like you, Lucy, and people who've been initially, if not all, permanently affected a lot more profoundly than me, that they do get better. I mean, life is better than it was when you were in hospital, and when you come out of hospital, life is better for most of us 6 months later, and 6 months down the line. And having met with a lot of co-walkers like yourself and myself, who there's a gradual gradient, and it does get better, and there is help, but there's nothing like the help that you get from the society. You mentioned it earlier, to meet kindred spirits, and to actually meet up that time in Birmingham, and to feel, you can really talk about this without anybody judging you, and that you could talk about it, and you could there was a common denominator that gave us a kind of a bond, that there's so much, I feel so much for the people who had the encephalitis 20 years ago, or 30, 40 years ago, and some of them were banished to mental hospitals, and that they didn't have that awareness of it, and that to be aware too that a lot of doctors and nurses and people in the medical profession know very little about it, which astounds me. And I see you wearing your encephalitis World Encephalitis Day, which is on the 22nd.
That's correct.
To promote awareness of it is what I would say to the person themselves. Don't give up hope, and get your family, or to contact the society, because there is great support there, and that to me was enormous in I think to where I am now, and the sense that when I started getting involved, like yourself too, as a volunteer, that you did feel that you could give something back to people coming behind us, and you could help them in the same way that people helped us. That's
totally.
But I would say, take your time. Yes, the other thing I would take, don't think that in 2 weeks' time everything is going to be honky dory. I don't think that's the case. Maybe it is for some people, and some people do make very quick. And I think if you're young as well, you have a better chance of
Mm.
again, you hear wonderful stories of children, and it doesn't phase them in the long term. And at the same time, we all evolve, and I think whether I had encephalitis or not, how much of a different person am I now than I was 10 years ago, or how much of a different person am I now than I was when I was 20?
Yeah.
Huge. Like, we do change, and we do. So there's a danger that you can over-evaluate and sort of say, is that the encephalitis, or is that just me being a natural nerd?
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah, and I think you're right, because there is it's about, sometimes you get in that kind of not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it is almost like, it's happening because of the encephalitis. Well, is it really, or is it just like, say,
Or if I convince myself there's no way I can go into that restaurant because all the cups and saucers that did my head in 3 or 4 years ago banging, that's going to drive me mad. And maybe if I convinced myself that, and before I went for a coffee in the morning, I'd be more aware of it, and I'd say, Jesus, like, let's go for a walk instead.
Yeah.
But I think that the fact that there definitely is a difference in that stage of recovery, that initially that raw sensory thing is very real.
Absolutely.
But as you get better, and if you become too analytical, it can become part maybe of who you are, and that's what I find, that there's a danger there that we just have to be careful with. But I would say to anybody,
any parts of you that you think have changed but for the better because of it?
Any part of me? No, it's all been downhill since I was about 26.
Fair enough. Oh, I love that, John. Brilliant. That's brilliant. One other thing.
I'm sure there are, Lucy. I just can't think.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I love, throughout, you've spoken about how important music is to you. And one of the questions that I like to ask everybody involved, in these little talks that we're doing is, how important music is to you, because like I've said as well, it's very important to me. I've always had like 1 or 2 kind of like power songs that I play through my headphones just to give me that boost of encouragement whenever I'm having like a low day or something like that. So are you able to, is there a song in particular, for example, for you that you had played, whether it was yourself on the piano or played by to listen to, that kind of like on your low days that, would carry you through that day?
Yeah, it's hard to put a finger on one, because music was such a part of me before encephalitis, during encephalitis, and post encephalitis, that but I did find that I connected a lot more emotionally with music, and a sad piece of music was even more pathetic and more profoundly sad, and in a strange way, that's a positive if you're big into music, because you felt that you could sense the music more. You could, rather than just tasting it, you could now smell it as well as tasting it, and feel it. That I always would have felt that I had a sensitivity for music, and music always should make you want. To me, should always make you want to just get down and bawl your eyes out, or get up and dance around the place. The middle of the road kind of elevator music never did anything for me. But so I would say that the piano, and I suppose melodically, I loved listening to everything from classical, like the unaccompanied Bach for cello or violin, will always blew my head, and still does. But I suppose just playing piano, and off the top of my head, 1 or 2 of the songs, like "Someone to Watch Over Me," that was a beautiful, beautiful melody, and "Somewhere Over the Rainbow."
Yeah.
"You've Got a Friend in Me," "You've Got a Friend," all those kind of ones that are lovely lovely melodies, but and lovely words
Mm.
that you could identify with. But yeah, I do remember sitting at the piano and feeling just getting into a piece of music. I nearly felt the tips of my fingers were more sensitive than they used to be, but they weren't. It was just,
Uh,
it was the way my head was working. And this is, I'm probably giving you the wrong answer here, Lucy. That's,
Not at all. No, I'm just like,
I
this
don't,
is amazing. I love it. I love it.
yeah. But yeah, music, I can't imagine my head without music.
Yeah.
Yeah. She only used to call me Walter Mitty when we started going out. She'd say, I know there's some piece of music going through your head, and there probably always is some piece of music going through my head.
Amazing. Do you
And that's the
compose
part.
your own music?
What's that, Liz?
Do you compose your own music?
No, was the answer.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
No. I well, arrange stuff, and I play by ear and have my own take on things.
Yeah.
But I never would have. I don't think I'd have made a living as a composer now.
No.
But yeah, I like to change things, and yeah, I'd probably be burnt at the stake by the purists, if
So you
don't take.
you would reinvent what other people have done then. So you listen to a piece of music and basically put your own spin on it.
Yeah, there might be a beautiful jazz chord that I would have heard. That'll be lovely there. And to somebody else, like that's like putting putting tomato ketchup on caviar. Like you just
Right. Yeah.
But to me, it's right, and that's fine. Just in my own, but I wouldn't pollute anyone else's ears with it.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. And I'm just thinking, just because we're coming to the end of our chat now, which just seems to have flown by incredibly quickly, can I just say, first of all, so thank you for your time. But also, it was just to say, is there anything that you would like to, say to our audience, those listening at home today or wherever they are listening or watching us? Is there anything that you wanted to say that I've not asked you today, or anything that you just want to put as a kind of end footnote for today?
Do you know what I will say, Lucy? You've just reminded me that we have an audience here. To be honest with you, for the last 20 minutes or whatever, I felt I was just talking to you.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Now that you reminded me that it's probably going to be out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope I didn't use any bad words or anything.
Well, you haven't, but we could always edit them out, even if you did.
Sorry, Lucy, what the last question was?
But no,
is there anything you left out?
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add?
No. No, I think just an awareness of the fact like that it's encephalitis is such a spectrum, and as you said, there are so many different causes, and there are a multiple of effects as well,
Yeah.
and it's sort of a common ground that we all bite a part of, but everybody is different, and I think has to do with your age, with the type of encephalitis that you have, and with how quickly you respond and how quickly you're diagnosed as well. But that everybody is different, and if you get bad news that things aren't looking good, that's not always the way things work out. Like I've met people who were nearly written off, and 2 years later they're planning on doing a marathon, and they're come back to do a master's degree, and which is fantastic. So I'd say don't give up hope at all, and get in touch, reach out there with the encephalitis, and there's quite a few of us around the place now, and we're only delighted to be able to support, and we can certainly we can offer our empathy and our own experience and what we've learned, at very good rates. If not for nothing. Absolutely free and a pleasure, and it's been really it's been lovely talking to you as always, Lucy, and
likewise.
Yeah, Thank you.
So much. Thank you. Well, I think on that note, I'll just wrap up and just say thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate speaking with you. And like you just said, you know, you're one of our highly regarded and loved volunteers over in Ireland. So to anybody who,
thank you, Lucy.
wants to speak with you, it's on a monthly basis. That's correct, isn't it? To come and do these meetings.
A monthly basis here in Ireland, yeah. And there are 2 support volunteers. Hannah was there before me, and she's amazing and great. So there's Hannah and myself would be the 2 support people here in Ireland. But there's a group now and a network, and you know, a wealth of experience building up of people, of parents and partners and people themselves who've had it. So a lot to learn, and I'd say it's not always where people come along with their problems and that it's a real wear you down. Sometimes it's a very feel good kind of a get together that we have, and we just to know that there's people out there that you can talk to.
Wonderful. John, thank you ever so much. We'll hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. You have been listening to The Day My Brain Broke. If you would like further information about the Encephalitis Society, their website is encephalitis.info. That's ENCEPHALITIS.info. You can also find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Also, if you have been or know of someone else who has been affected by encephalitis and you would like to share your story, please do get in contact with us, as we would love to hear from you. You can email me at lucy.teamencephalitis@gmail.com. And finally, if you're also inclined to see more of what I have to offer, then please do like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ladybird Wellness. You can also find Ladybird Wellness on Facebook and Instagram.